making me shiver because I'm just not ready. It's 7 more sleeps. I was running around yesterday like a chook with its head cut off, trying to get organised, buy everything you need for the table, think about presents, food. I haven't even thought that far ahead yet. But I looked up and saw one of those notice boards outside a church where they leave their messages for the season on there, and it read, "Don't forget, Jesus is the reason for the season." And I laughed a little bit, I like a little rhyme, but then I can tell you right now, Jesus is not the reason for the season for my next guest, because my next guest is an atheist, and he's part of a growing movement of atheism around Australia. Did you know about 60% of Aussies consider themselves Christian? A few more, about 6%, practice other religions like Buddhism, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, and then 22% have declared themselves to be people of no religion. Nothing. Steve Marton is one of them. He's the president of the group known as Sydney Atheists, and he joins me now. Good afternoon, Steve.
And a very good afternoon to you, Sarah.
Now, I have to ask you this question up first, but does the worship of God actually disturb you?
Look, Sarah, I like to think of Australia as a civilised, educated country. When people worship any fantasy being, such as a god, or fantasy-associated beings like angels and devils,
unicorns,
and they consider these as real, or fantasy structures like heaven and hell, as places of reward or punishment, then I have to admit that, yes, I do find it disturbing.
On what grounds?
On the grounds that I don't consider any of them to be real. And unfortunately, if people consider unrealities to be realities, then it can lead to dangerous results, such as misleading children, placing barriers to people opening their minds, pursuing endeavours that they might otherwise pursue because their God limits them, and that to me is a big worry.
You mentioned there, Steve, about possibly not following almost your dreams because of something that's possibly come up in a scripture or a Bible. What's an example of that?
If they think of their life as being more important at some other time, they're more likely to forego the joys, the pleasures, the pursuits of this life, thinking that they're going to get something better in an afterlife. And that's such a shame, because this life is so opportune, so wonderful, and I just feel for those people that they're going to miss all those opportunities. And people over the millenniums have gone to war based on their perception that there would be some afterlife. They've given their lives to leaders thinking that there'd be an afterlife, and that just seems crazy.
Now, we've spoken a lot about what people who do believe in a God believe in. Do atheists believe in anything?
Now, that's a damn good question, Sarah. Look, as atheists, the sort of things that we do believe in, as varied as humans can be. Generally, we believe in fair and decent laws. We believe in good ethics and morals, and we believe in a rational approach to various matters that we might consider. So there's no written thing that we follow. We really like to think for ourselves. So there's no commonality necessarily, other than that we don't believe in gods.
Does that mean you're not spiritual at all?
Spirituality is a very interesting concept. I mean, if spirituality, you can follow a team, or a team has a team spirit, well, that's spirituality that I can come to terms with. However, spirituality means that there's some sort of ghost or creature that emanates from us, that's separate from us, either in this life or some afterlife, or in death. Well, that's not something that I can consider other than to be fantasy. I do believe that our minds die with our bodies.
What do you think will happen to you when you die?
The phrase "from dust to dust" rings very loud.
Right, straight into the ground for the worms there, by the sound of it.
Absolutely.
I often drive on a Sunday morning and I see people coming out of church. They're friends, and I see this community, and sometimes, to be honest, I get a little bit jealous, Steve. I think, isn't that lovely that on Sunday morning they have this wonderfully social gathering where they think similarly and they do things together, and then they have this community that probably goes on during the week. You do things together in other sorts of groups. For atheists, you obviously can't go to church on a Sunday morning, so does your group give you that community feeling?
Sarah, look, it absolutely does. We have social meetings, and we get together and we just talk about anything we like, really. And then we have talk evenings, and we have those every month, and that can be on various of the topics that I just mentioned. in those talks we have a social structure that we can get together, but of course, as a human being myself and as a very social human being, look, I've been involved in tennis, table tennis, football, you name it, any gamut of things, and so that gives me my social interaction, which is very important.
The other area that I sometimes get jealous of Christianity on is, and I spoke to a lady, I met a lady one day whose son had been murdered, and he'd been absolutely senselessly murdered. It was a bit of a freak thing. It was a robbery gone wrong, and he was killed. Now, she and her husband dealt with it in two very different ways. She's a devout Catholic, and she honestly believed in her heart of hearts that her son had been called by God, and that helped her to get on with her life. She was, of course, extraordinarily sad, but she felt that her son had a higher calling, and she was almost proud of that, and she was happy for that. Her husband, on the other hand, was not as devout in the Catholicism that she was, and he was a broken man from that point onwards. And I often thought, if I had the choice, in that situation, I wish I'd had that belief, that religious belief, to help me deal with my grief.
Sure. Look, Sarah, I think people are very different. You can take two religious people, any religion you like, and confront them with death, and they will have a very different response to that. I see death as a very sad and unfortunate thing. However, it's a reality. I know that everybody's going to die. I know that I'm going to die. And, the thought that there's some sort of afterlife, again, is unfortunate, because it's a betrayal of the reality of life and death.
I guess for this woman, though, it was just a way of dealing with her grief that perhaps you or I wouldn't have if one of our children was murdered. The other thing I'm interested in with the atheism movement is, do you have many former Christians who've come along and, not seen the light, or seen the light, whichever way you want to look at it, and have decided that they're no longer Christians?
The overwhelming number of our members are probably people that once upon a time believed in some sort of religion, and look, because Australia is predominantly a Christian nation, the majority of people that we do have coming along to our meetings were once upon a time one Christian or another. We've got Catholics, Protestants, you name it, but also we've got many, many people that were formerly Jews, Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, and some of those religious beliefs, it's very hard for them to come out of their religion, because their religions are very threatening when they come out. But we do have them, and we have them from many, many countries, and we come together as atheists, and nothing else matters. We're multiracial, multi-aged, and it's just a fantastic sight to see.
How's it worked for you, Steve? Did you decide to become an atheist, or did you just never catch on to God?
Look, I used to believe in the Abrahamic God once upon a time, and up to my teens, and look, I was a keen student of science, and I realised that the belief in gods, and what I began to see as religious, excuse me for saying so, gobbledygook, were inconsistent with scientific realities and the rules of logic. So slowly but surely I thought, well, I just don't believe this. I can't believe it. It's just not possible. And it wasn't until much later in life that I thought, well, why do other people believe this when clearly it's wrong for me? And then I actually did do studies of comparative religion, not in a class atmosphere, but on my own, and that was very interesting.
Do you have people who come up, and abuse is a strong word, but have a go at you for your lack of belief, so to speak?
Oh, Sarah, look, it is terribly funny when they do, and you're quite right, they do that, and they really think that they're right, and look, in their own minds, that they can be right. I guess in my own mind, I don't see that there can be a God. Some of them do become aggressive, but look, there's cognitive dissonance. So some people are prepared to be absolutely logical about every aspect of their life, everything that they do. But for this one thing called religion, and that can be any religion you like, they are prepared to package this religious belief in a separate part of their brain and not allow the logical systems to confront their religious beliefs.
Now, this is the mean question, Stephen, I have to ask it, but Christmas, obviously that's come from a Christian background. Do you celebrate Christmas?
I'd have to say that I don't celebrate Christmas. I certainly passively get involved in Christmas, in as much as that if I had to define myself as any belief system, well, that belief system is in the great chocolate in the sky. So I am a chocoholic, and Christmas, like Easter or any other celebration, gives me the opportunity to have some more chocolate.
Do you ever feel feel a little bit hypocritical in those situations, though?
Look, I guess that could be a fair question. I mean, we take the public holiday, but in the work that I do, nobody can to come and see me at Christmas, so I'm pretty much obliged to it. In as much as, you might consider Sunday to be a day of worship. Well, it's just part of our culture, so we take 2 days off on the weekend. Nobody seems to do anything particularly work-like on Christmas. I mean, some people unfortunately do have to work at Christmas, but it's another public holiday as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I hope those chocky gods are good to you this year then. Thank you very much for your time, Steve Marton, President of the Sydney Atheists. It's a delight to talk to you.
Sarah, thank you very much indeed.
Steve has really opened a can of worms here in the office. Sarah Morice with you here. It is great to have your company this afternoon on 2UE Afternoons. Now, we're talking about atheists. We just spoke to Steve Marton, who's the president of the group called Sydney Atheists. Controversially, certainly controversially in this office, who's just said he, despite the fact he's an atheist, is going to be celebrating Christmas today. And there's a lot of people around here saying you can't do that. You can't cherry pick the best of a religion and take the presents and the good food and the day off work and the general festiveness that comes with Christmas if you don't believe in Jesus and God. And we're wondering what you think. 131332, is it hypocritical of atheists to celebrate Christmas? I also wonder what you think about what Steve just had to say. He's called all gods gobbledygook. And he also says that essentially anyone who believes in a god or any religion is believing in something that's completely made up. It's all make-believe. May as well be a unicorn or a mermaid. What do you think about this? 131332, we've still got a few lines open for calls now. Daryl, good afternoon.
How are you doing?
Yeah, very well. You're an atheist, are you?
Yes, I am. And it's interesting you use the term cherry pick, and it's very interesting that people who would follow the Christian tradition would say cherry pick. Mm-hmm. Atheists in celebrating Christmas. I love Christmas, absolutely love it, always have done. Love buying presents, putting up the tree, putting up the lights. I'm just sitting out the front of my house doing my handiwork at the moment.
Yes.
For many people, Christmas, I guess by name, is a Christian celebration, but it's got little to do with Jesus.
I guess, though, people who are religious, Daryl, would disagree with that. They would say that it's an extraordinarily important day for them to remember Jesus, who, was born as their saviour and then died for them. I think they're celebrating his birth.
But Jesus was born, if there is a Jesus, was born in May, or around May, maybe April, and the celebration of his birth was actually moved to a pagan holiday.
So it doesn't actually mean, 25th of December doesn't actually mean his birth.
No, the holiday was to celebrate, I think it was coming into winter. It was the end of the growing season. It was just reason to celebrate. They toiled all through summer and reason to celebrate. And then when the Romans took over Christianity, then they basically adopted it with their thing. And I don't have to go into all the debates. All the atheists will know the story.
Sure. How do you go at Easter, Daryl?
Look, at the moment, I've got to say that Easter was a little bit low key because we've got a child with dairy intolerance, and we don't really want to be feeding him with eggs and everything. But I've always, my birthday often falls on Good Friday, which is also then Black Friday, because it's the 13th. So, I often have my birthday around the same time, and given everything like that, eggs have got little to do with
Christianity and the death of Jesus. You make a good point, Daryl. Thanks for your call there. Daryl's an atheist, has no dramas celebrating Christmas. Margaret, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'd like to make a couple of points. First of all, some famous atheists were Hitler, Pol Pot, Stalin and Chairman Mao. So the ability to say that people who believe in so-called unreal gods.
But I don't think we can blame their atheism on anything they did in life.
What I'm saying is that they are famous for people who would not have followed God, and the gentleman was making the point that people have unreal ideas because they believe in what he sees as unreal gods. But the good ethics, morals and fair laws he suggested he liked to follow, any law person who studies history will tell you that the majority of our good and moral laws are based on Judeo-Christian ethics, and so basically in a sense he's following and has if he agrees with the morals that are the good things in society today. The other thing is that the so-called misdirected, which there are actually millions of Christians around the world, and one famous person who was a Christian was on a plane talking to someone, and someone was going to a big conference, and the person said to him, well, what do you do? He said, well, I'm involved in a worldwide organisation that runs hospitals, education, counselling, universities, and helping the poor. And they said, wow, that's a fantastic organisation. And what is it? He said, Christianity.
So, Margaret, you're a Christian yourself?
Yes, and as far as the symbolism goes, for Christianity, the Christmas season was based on a pagan system, but if you use money every day and you use it for good, it doesn't mean you're using it for evil. So consequently, it may have been changed to a different time of year, but that doesn't take away from the reason why, for, and dedication of how people celebrate it on that time. And for Christians,